The air inside Denver International Airport buzzed with the low hum of conversations, flight announcements echoing from the loudspeakers, and the steady rhythm of rolling luggage. Officer Sarah Monroe adjusted the harness on Max, her Belgian Malinois partner, his amber eyes sharp as they scanned the sea of travelers. The fluorescent lights above cast sterile shadows on the tiled floors, but Sarah trusted Max more than any camera or protocol. He was her edge, her instinct in canine form. "Terminal C, routine patrol. Keep an eye out for anything unusual," crackled the voice from Sarah's radio. "Copy that," she replied, giving Max a light tap on his side. "You ready, partner?" Max let out a soft huff in response, his ears perking forward. They moved in synchronized steps through the crowds, Sarah's boots clicking steadily against the polished floor, while Max's paws made almost no sound. Years of training had molded him into the perfect working dog, but his real gift wasn't something anyone could train. Max felt things. He noticed details Sarah might miss. They were halfway through their patrol route when Max suddenly stopped. His body stiffened, ears locked forward, nostrils flaring as he picked up an unfamiliar scent. His tail froze straight behind him like an exclamation mark. "Max?" Sarah knelt beside him, her voice low and controlled. "What do you got?" Max let out a short, sharp bark, his eyes locked onto something under a bench. Sarah followed his gaze and saw it, a tiny pink sneaker, smudged with dirt and tucked almost completely out of sight beneath the metal frame. It was small, impossibly small, and definitely out of place in the bustling terminal. Her stomach knotted. A child's shoe. Alone. She slipped on a pair of gloves and carefully pulled the shoe out, turning it in her hands. It was damp, the laces were frayed, and there was a faint smear of something dark near the heel. Blood? No. She couldn't jump to conclusions. But Max wasn't moving, his nose twitching as he inhaled the air around the shoe, his body rigid with focus. Sarah's radio crackled again. "Monroe, everything okay?" She hesitated before responding. "We've found something. A child's shoe, Terminal C, near Gate 34. Copy that. Bag it and report to lost and found. Probably just something someone dropped." But Sarah knew better. She looked at Max, who hadn't broken his intense focus. "This isn't just dropped," she murmured. Max barked again, more urgent this time, and then pulled against his leash, nose to the floor as he started tracking. Sarah didn't stop him. Her instincts were screaming the same thing his were. Something's wrong. The pair followed the trail through the terminal, weaving between confused travelers and security personnel. Max moved with singular determination, his body low to the ground, tail wagging faintly in concentration. They turned a corner, and Sarah's heart jumped when Max stopped abruptly in front of an emergency exit door, marked Authorized Personnel Only. The faintest smear of dirt was visible at the bottom of the door frame. "Monroe to control. I need access to an emergency exit. Terminal C. Possible lead on..." She hesitated, unwilling to say it aloud yet. "Just open it." A few tense moments later, the magnetic lock on the door clicked open. Sarah pushed through, with Max bounding forward into a dimly lit service corridor that smelled of industrial cleaner and something else, something faintly metallic. Sarah's flashlight cut through the shadows as Max led her down the narrow hallway. They passed stacks of luggage carts and crates of cleaning supplies. And then Max stopped again, nose pressed against a small, dusty backpack shoved behind a cleaning station. Sarah crouched and gently unzipped it. Inside were children's clothes, crumpled and stained. A small toy car sat at the bottom, its bright red paint chipped and dulled. Her breath caught. There was no doubt now, this wasn't just a lost shoe. This was something far worse. "Control," she said, her voice tight. "I need backup in Terminal C service corridor. Now!" But the radio crackled with static, and no response came. Sarah's pulse quickened. Something wasn't right. She turned her attention back to Max, who was now staring intently into the darkness ahead, his fur bristling slightly along his back. He growled low, the sound reverberating through the narrow corridor. "Who's there?" Sarah called out into the shadows. No answer. But then, a faint sound, A shuffle. Someone was there, watching. Sarah reached for her sidearm, her free hand steadying Max. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Easy, buddy. We've got this." From the far end of the corridor, a shadow moved. Just a flicker, a silhouette disappearing around the corner. And then, faint but unmistakable, came a voice. A child's sob. Sarah's chest tightened. Max barked sharply, straining against his leash, ready to charge. And in that moment, Sarah knew they couldn't wait. Backup or not, she and Max were the only ones standing between whoever or whatever was down that hallway and an innocent child who might not have much time left. "Let's go, Max," she said, her voice firm. "Stay close." Together they stepped into the dark. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, every flicker of the fluorescent lights above casting sharp, ghostly shadows against the concrete walls. Sarah gripped her flashlight tightly in one hand, her other hovering over her sidearm. Max led the way, his body low to the ground, nose sweeping back and forth as he tracked the faint scent. His growl had softened into focused silence, a predator zeroed in on invisible prey. Somewhere ahead, faint and distant, the muffled sound of a child's sob echoed through the narrow passageway. "Easy, Max," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible above the faint hum of industrial air vents. "We're getting close." The air was different back here, stagnant and heavy, carrying a metallic scent Sarah couldn't quite place. These service corridors were rarely used, snaking through the airport like forgotten veins. They weren't on any standard map, but Sarah had spent enough time patrolling to know they existed. Most people had no idea these places even were places. Max stopped abruptly. His ears twitched, and his head snapped to the left, toward a partially open maintenance door with a flickering fluorescent bulb hanging loosely from the ceiling above it. Sarah knelt beside him, her heartbeat steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "You smell something, boy?" Max didn't respond, just stared at the door, his tail frozen and his body coiled tight like a spring. Sarah pushed the door open gently, wincing as the rusted hinges groaned in protest. Her flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating a cramped storage room filled with mop buckets, cardboard boxes, and cleaning supplies. But in the corner, something caught her eye. A blanket, small, colorful. She moved forward carefully, her boots barely making a sound on the concrete floor. Max followed, his nose twitching furiously as he crept closer to the blanket. And then Sarah saw it, a tiny, trembling figure curled beneath the fabric. A child. The little girl couldn't have been older than 5. Her hair was matted, her cheeks stained with tears, and her tiny body shook with silent sobs. Her wide eyes met Sarah's, and she recoiled, pulling the blanket tighter around her. Sarah's voice softened, every ounce of authority replaced with gentle calm. "Hey there, sweetheart. It's okay. I'm here to help. My name's Sarah. This is Max. He's a good boy, see?" Max, as if sensing the gravity of the moment, lowered himself slowly onto his belly, his ears flat, his big amber eyes locked on the child. He let out a soft whine, a sound so gentle it barely registered. The little girl's lip quivered as she glanced at Max. Something about his presence, his stillness, seemed to comfort her. Sarah extended her hand slowly, palm up. "Can you come with me? I promise, we're going to keep you safe." The child hesitated, but then crawled forward, still clutching the blanket tightly. She reached a trembling hand toward Max, who sniffed it gently before giving it a delicate lick. The little girl let out a faint, broken laugh, a sound that pierced Sarah's chest. But the moment shattered with the sharp clank of metal somewhere outside the room. The little girl froze, her tiny fingers gripping Max's fur. Sarah spun around, her flashlight cutting toward the doorway. Footsteps, heavy, fast. Sarah pulled her sidearm free. "Stay behind me," she whispered over her shoulder to the child. Max was already on his feet, his body tense, and his growl vibrating low in his chest. The sound of footsteps grew louder, closer, before stopping abruptly outside the door. "Who's there?" Sarah demanded, her voice firm, gun aimed at the entrance. Silence. Max's growl deepened, his lips curling back to reveal sharp teeth. Sarah's finger hovered over the trigger, then a voice, A man's voice, low and oily, slithered through the doorway. "You shouldn't be here, officer." Sarah's grip on her weapon tightened. "Step into the light now." But instead of complying, the footsteps retreated, fading quickly into the distance. "Coward," Sarah muttered under her breath before turning back to the girl. "Okay, sweetheart. We're leaving. Right now." She lifted the girl carefully into her arms, holding her close against her chest as she backed out of the storage room. Max stayed glued to her side, his head swiveling as he scanned every corner, every shadow. Sarah's radio crackled with static as they moved quickly back through the corridor. "Control, this is Monroe. I have a child, female, approximately 5 years old. We're en route back to Terminal C main concourse. Possible suspect fled the scene, requesting immediate assistance." No response, just static. Sarah cursed under her breath. Someone was interfering with the radio signals, and she had a sinking feeling she knew who. They emerged from the corridor back into the main terminal, the blinding overhead lights momentarily disorienting after the darkness of the service halls. The terminal was still alive with the hum of travelers, oblivious to the danger just below their feet. But Sarah wasn't safe yet. She spotted 2 uniformed officers nearby and approached them. "This child needs medical attention now, and we need to lock down Terminal C. There's someone..." But one of the officers interrupted her. "We've been told to stand down, Officer Monroe. Orders from higher up." Sarah's blood went cold. "Stand down? Are you kidding me? There's a child..." "Orders are orders." Sarah's eyes locked with Max's for the briefest second. He was looking past the officers, his nose twitching, his ears flicking slightly. She followed his gaze and saw him staring at a man in a janitor's uniform far across the terminal, walking briskly toward an exit. Their eyes met for half a second before the man turned and broke into a sprint. Sarah didn't hesitate. "Max, go!" Max bolted forward, weaving through crowds, his powerful body moving like a missile locked onto its target. Sarah handed the girl to one of the officers. "Keep her safe!" And then she was running, her boots pounding against the tile floor, her breath sharp and focused. Across the terminal, the janitor disappeared into another restricted area. Max was closing in, but Sarah knew this was far from over. The cold night air seeped into the maintenance tunnel as Sarah sprinted, her boots striking the slick concrete with sharp precision. Ahead of her, Max was a blur of fur and focus, his paws barely making a sound as he chased the fleeing figure in the janitor's uniform. Every corner they turned, every shadow they passed, Sarah's mind buzzed with questions. Who was this man? How deep did this go? And why was the airport security turning a blind eye? "Max, steady!" she called, her voice cutting through the dim tunnel. Max let out a sharp bark, signaling he had the scent locked. The figure ahead bolted through a heavy steel door, slamming it shut behind him. Sarah reached the door seconds later, her palms sliding across the handle. Locked. "Damn it," she muttered, holstering her sidearm. "Max, find another way." The Belgian Malinois spun in a tight circle, nose to the ground, before darting down a side passage. Sarah followed close behind, her flashlight beam slicing through the shadows. They emerged into a cavernous underground storage area filled with luggage carts, cargo containers, and towering stacks of shipping crates. Somewhere, faint footsteps echoed. Max's nose shot into the air, and he growled low. Sarah felt it before she heard it. A faint rustle from the far side of the storage bay. Her flashlight illuminated the figure crouched behind a crate. The man froze like a cornered animal. "Don't move!" Sarah's voice was sharp, unwavering. She raised her firearm. "Put your hands where I can see them." But the man didn't comply. Instead, he bolted straight into a maze of cargo containers. "Max, after him!" The dog surged forward, slipping effortlessly through narrow gaps, his bark echoing in the cavernous space. Sarah followed as best she could, dodging obstacles and squeezing through tight passages. Her breath was sharp, her pulse hammering in her ears. The chase ended abruptly. Max had the suspect cornered against a stack of crates, teeth bared, chest heaving with exertion. Sarah approached carefully, her gun steady. "Game's over," she said, her voice cold. "Hands up, now!" The man raised trembling hands, his eyes darting between Sarah and Max. He was young, no older than 25, his janitor's uniform stained with sweat and grease. "Please," he stammered, his voice cracking. "I didn't want to be part of this. They said they'd hurt my family if I didn't do what they asked." Sarah hesitated. There was something raw, something broken in his voice. "Who are they?" she demanded. "Who's running this operation?" But before the man could respond, a loud pop echoed through the storage area, a silenced gunshot. Sarah ducked instinctively as the man crumpled to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. Max barked furiously, teeth snapping at the air as Sarah scanned the area. She spotted a shadow disappearing through a service door on the far side of the room. "Sniper!" she whispered, her stomach turning to ice. She knelt beside the dying man, her gloved hands pressing uselessly against the gunshot wound. His lips moved faintly, and Sarah leaned closer. "Locker 472, he rasped, before his eyes went glassy, his head lolling to the side. Sarah exhaled sharply, her jaw clenched against the rising anger and helplessness swelling in her chest. "Max, let's move." They exited the storage bay and emerged into the terminal's staff locker room area. Rows of grey metal lockers stretched down the narrow space, each one identical to the next. Sarah's flashlight flickered over the numbers until she found it. Locker 472. The metal creaked as she opened it, and inside, a single file folder sat atop a stack of neatly folded janitorial uniforms. She flipped it open, and her blood ran cold. Photographs, names, flight schedules, children. It wasn't just one victim, it was a system. Each photo had a flight number scribbled in red ink beside it, dates aligned with specific cargo manifests. Sarah's breath hitched as she turned to Max, who was sitting quietly by her side, ears perked. "This is bigger than I thought," she whispered. Flashback, scars that don't heal. For a brief moment, Sarah closed her eyes, and the past came rushing back. 3 years ago, a nighttime raid in a derelict warehouse on the outskirts of Phoenix. Sarah had been partnered with her previous canine, Rex, a stoic German shepherd who had been her partner for 4 years. They'd gone in expecting a simple drug bust, but the traffickers had been waiting. Sarah had been pinned down in a corner, out of ammunition, when Rex had charged forward, teeth bared, buying her the precious seconds she needed to escape. But Rex didn't make it out. The sound of the gunshot, the flash of blood against concrete, it was burned into her memory. The way Rex's body had crumpled at her feet still haunted her dreams. Sarah had blamed herself. She'd sworn she'd never let it happen again. Sarah snapped back to the present. She pressed the file folder against her chest, her knuckles white. "This ends now," she said quietly to Max. "We're not letting them slip away." Her radio crackled to life suddenly, breaking the heavy silence. "Monroe, this is Control. Where the hell are you? You've gone dark." Sarah brought the radio to her lips. "Control, I have evidence of an active trafficking operation happening right now in Terminal C. I need lockdown protocols initiated immediately. Do you copy?" A long pause. "Negative, Monroe. Orders are to stand down. Come back to the command center. Now." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "They know." She glanced at Max, his amber eyes watching her intently. "No," she said softly into the radio. "I'm seeing this through." She turned off the radio and shoved it back into her belt. "Max, let's move." Together they stepped back into the bright chaos of the airport terminal. Sarah's mind was sharp, her focus unyielding. They had evidence, they had leads, and they had each other. But someone powerful was pulling the strings, and Sarah knew she and Max were now targets. Somewhere above them, a child's life still hung in the balance, and time was running out. The terminal lights burned bright overhead, but Sarah felt like she was moving through shadows. Her fingers tightened around the file folder clutched to her chest as she strode through the bustling crowd. Every face around her felt like a mask. Passengers laughing into phones, children dragging stuffed animals, businessmen sipping overpriced coffee, all oblivious to the sinister undercurrent beneath their feet. Max walked beside her, head low, ears flicking constantly as he scanned their surroundings. He could feel it too, the danger, the tension humming in the air like a live wire. Sarah's radio remained silent on her hip. She had turned it off after the last chilling order to stand down. Whoever was pulling the strings had influence, power, and they were watching her every move. She ducked into a staff-only hallway, her boots echoing off the polished tile. At the end of the hallway, an elevator waited, its brushed steel doors gleaming faintly in the flickering fluorescent light. "Cargo terminal," she muttered to Max. "That's where the next flight on this manifest is scheduled to depart." The file folder she carried contained more than names and photos. It contained a specific flight. Flight 417 to Bogota. She punched the button for the lower cargo terminal, and the elevator doors hissed shut. As the hum of descent filled the small space, Sarah leaned back against the cold metal wall and closed her eyes briefly. "Focus. Stay sharp. Max is counting on you. That little girl we saved is counting on you. And the ones still out there, they need you." The elevator jolted to a stop and the doors slid open with a quiet chime. The cargo terminal was a stark contrast to the bright chaos above, a cavernous space filled with rows of containers, towering metal crates, and forklifts beeping faintly in the distance. The air smelled of oil, metal, and something faintly damp. The low hum of machinery reverberated through the concrete walls. Max stepped forward first, his nose twitching, his body tense with anticipation. Sarah adjusted her grip on her sidearm and scanned the rows of cargo crates. Somewhere among them, someone was orchestrating this nightmare. Someone who had slipped through the cracks of the airport's authority, but they weren't slipping past her, not tonight. "Easy, Max," she whispered. Max froze suddenly, his head snapping toward the far end of the warehouse. His tail stiffened, ears locked forward. Then Sarah heard it, a muffled cry, small, fragile, a child. Sarah's blood turned to ice as she followed Max, weaving between crates and pallets. The crying grew louder, mixed with muffled voices, 2, maybe 3 men. The glow of a lantern flickered from behind a stack of shipping containers. Sarah signaled Max with a hand gesture. "Stay low, stay quiet." They moved like shadows, silent and deliberate. Sarah crouched behind a stack of crates and peered around the corner. 3 men stood near a shipping container marked with a flight manifest. The door to the container was cracked open, and Sarah caught a glimpse of a small face peeking out, wide eyes glistening with tears. One of the men barked an order in sharp, accented English. "Get it sealed and loaded. Flight leaves in 40 minutes. Sarah's jaw clenched. They were running out of time. She took a deep breath, her voice steady. "Denver PD, drop your weapons and put your hands where I can see them." The men froze. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then chaos erupted. One man bolted into the darkness, disappearing between crates. Another pulled a pistol from his waistband. But before he could aim, Max lunged forward, teeth flashing, a guttural growl tearing from his throat. The man screamed as Max clamped down on his arm, wrenching the gun away and dragging him to the ground. Sarah fired once, a clean shot that struck the second man in the shoulder. He crumpled with a sharp cry, his pistol clattering across the concrete floor. The third man, likely the leader, locked eyes with Sarah for a split second before disappearing into the maze of crates. "Max, stay!" Sarah barked. She couldn't risk losing sight of the children. She ran to the container, pulling the heavy metal door open with trembling hands. Inside, 3 children huddled together, their faces streaked with tears and dirt. "It's okay," Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly. "You're safe now. I'm taking you out of here." Max stood guard at the container door, his chest heaving, his teeth bared as he scanned the darkness for movement. Sarah radioed for backup, her voice trembling as she barked instructions. "Control. This is Monroe. Immediate assistance required at Cargo Terminal B. I have 3 child victims in custody. Armed suspects on site. Repeat, immediate assistance." This time there was no hesitation. "Copy that, Monroe. Units en route." The sound of approaching sirens echoed faintly from above. But then, movement. From the shadows, the leader emerged, holding something, a child. A 4th child, a girl no older than 7, with tear-streaked cheeks and a trembling lower lip. "She comes with me!" the man snarled, pressing a knife to her neck. Sarah froze. Her gun remained steady, her eyes locked on the man. Max growled low, his body coiled like a spring. "You're not walking out of here with her," Sarah said, her voice deathly calm. "Oh, I think I am," the man sneered. The girl whimpered. The knife pressed closer to her throat. For one heartbeat, everything froze. The cold air, the distant sound of sirens, Sarah's finger on the trigger. Then Max moved. In a blur of fur and fury, Max lunged. The man flinched, pulling the knife slightly away from the child's neck. It was all the opening Sarah needed. Bang! The man fell backward, his knife clattering to the floor. The little girl stumbled forward, sobbing as Sarah caught her in her arms. Max stood over the man's motionless body, his teeth bared, his chest heaving. "It's over," Sarah whispered into the girl's hair as she held her close. "It's over." The sirens grew louder as police units stormed into the cargo terminal. Officers swarmed the area, taking the remaining suspects into custody and escorting the children to safety. Sarah knelt beside Max, running a trembling hand over his head. "You did good, buddy. You did so good." Max let out a soft whine and rested his head against her chest. Above them, the cold fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, illuminating the remnants of a nightmare. But the children were safe, and tonight, Sarah and Max had done what they'd set out to do. They'd stopped the darkness, at least for now. The glow of dawn crept over the horizon, painting Denver International Airport in hues of cold blue and muted gold. Emergency lights still flashed across the cargo terminal, reflecting off crates and casting jagged shadows against the concrete walls. The air was heavy with the scent of burnt rubber, gunpowder, and the faint metallic tang of blood. Sarah leaned against the back of an ambulance, a steaming cup of black coffee cradled between trembling fingers. Her uniform was streaked with dust and sweat, her hair clinging to her forehead in damp strands. Max lay at her feet, his head resting on his paws, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion, but still alert to every passing sound. The children had been taken away to safety. The remaining traffickers were either dead, handcuffed in the back of police cruisers, or being loaded into ambulances. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. Something was still off. The file she had found in locker 472, those names, the flight schedules, they pointed to something much larger than the men they had stopped tonight. "Officer Monroe." Sarah turned to see Captain Harris approaching, his imposing frame silhouetted by the flashing lights. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, and his polished boots clicked against the asphalt. "Captain," Sarah said, standing straighter, "good work tonight. You and Max saved lives." His tone was flat, rehearsed. Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly. "Sir, this isn't over. The documents I found, there are more flights, more children. This operation isn't isolated." Captain Harris sighed, glancing around as if ensuring no one else was listening. "You've done enough for one night, Officer Monroe. Go home. Get some rest." "No," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "I'm not walking away from this. Someone let this happen, someone inside this airport, and I think you know who." Captain Harris's jaw tightened. For a brief moment, Sarah saw something flicker in his expression. Regret? Guilt? "Sarah, drop it," he said, his voice low. "You don't want to dig any deeper into this." But Sarah's instincts, the same instincts she shared with Max, screamed at her. Her eyes locked with the captain's, and she took a step closer. "You knew," she said softly, realization dawning like a cold shadow. "You knew this was happening, and you let it continue." Captain Harris's eyes darted toward Max, who was now standing, teeth faintly bared, his amber eyes fixed on the man in front of them. "It's bigger than me, Monroe," Harris said, almost pleading. "You think this ends with me? There are people above me, people with power, people who—" A gunshot split the air. Sarah flinched as Captain Harris's body jerked backward, a red bloom spreading across his chest. He crumpled to the asphalt, his wide eyes staring at the sky in shocked stillness. Sarah spun around, her gun drawn. A sniper. Somewhere, someone was watching them, silencing loose ends. Max growled deeply, his head snapping toward an elevated walkway overlooking the cargo terminal. Sarah spotted a faint silhouette, a man lowering a rifle before vanishing into the shadows. "Max, go!" Max bolted forward as Sarah sprinted after him, her boots slamming against metal stairs as they climbed toward the upper level. Her chest burned with each breath, her mind racing. Whoever this was, they weren't cleaning up loose ends, they were trying to bury the truth entirely. The rooftop confrontation. The rooftop was a barren expanse of tar and gravel, dotted with rusted ventilation units and blinking red aviation lights. The wind whipped against Sarah's face as she emerged from the stairwell, gun raised. Max was already there, standing stiff and alert, a low growl rumbling deep in his throat. A man stood a few feet away, silhouetted against the faint glow of dawn. He was dressed in black tactical gear, his rifle slung casually over one shoulder. His face was shadowed by a hood. "Officer Monroe," the man said, his voice smooth and composed. "You've been very persistent. Admirable, really." Sarah's finger twitched on the trigger. "Who are you?" The man chuckled. "Does it matter? I'm not the head of this snake, officer. Cut me down and 2 more will grow in my place." Sarah's gun didn't waver. "You're not walking away from here." "Oh, but I am." He took a slow step backward, gesturing to a helicopter approaching in the distance, its rotor blades slicing through the early morning air. Sarah's radio crackled. It was Control. "Monroe, we have units inbound. Stand down. Repeat, stand down." Sarah's grip on the gun tightened. Her gut screamed that if she let this man leave, everything, every child still out there, every trafficker still operating, would remain in the shadows. The man turned toward the edge of the roof, smirking over his shoulder, and then Max moved. With a ferocious bark, Max lunged, teeth sinking into the man's arm. The rifle fell, clattering across the gravel. Sarah advanced, her sidearm aimed directly at the man's head. "Call them off," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "Call them off!" But the man only grinned, blood seeping from where Max's teeth still gripped him. "You don't understand, Officer Monroe," he hissed. "This doesn't stop. Not with me. Not with you." His free hand slipped into his tactical vest. Sarah saw the grenade pin flash between his fingers. "Max, down!" The explosion ripped through the rooftop. Sarah was thrown backward, the world spinning in a haze of smoke and fire. She hit the gravel hard, her ears ringing and her vision blurring. "Max!" she gasped, coughing through the smoke. From the haze, Max emerged, limping slightly but alive. His fur was singed, but he was by her side in seconds, nudging her shoulder with his snout. The man was gone, vaporized, along with the evidence he carried. The helicopter above them circled briefly before disappearing into the horizon. Sarah let out a shaky breath, clutching Max's fur as tears pricked the corners of her eyes. They had stopped one operation, saved some children, but the people pulling the strings, they were still out there, still hidden in the dark corners of power. The sound of sirens and voices shouting filled the air as officers finally reached the rooftop. Sarah sat up, her hand still tangled in Max's fur. "This isn't over," she said quietly, her voice hoarse, not by a long shot. Max rested his head against her shoulder, his amber eyes watching the horizon as the first golden rays of sunlight crept across the city skyline. The warm glow of sunrise spilled over the vast runways of Denver International Airport, painting the asphalt in hues of gold and crimson. Emergency vehicles clustered near the cargo terminal, their lights still flashing as officers moved in hurried, purposeful strides. Somewhere far away from the chaos, planes lifted into the sky, carrying passengers unaware of how close they'd come to brushing against the darkness Sarah Monroe had spent the night battling. Sarah sat on the tailgate of an ambulance, a steaming cup of black coffee cradled between trembling fingers. Her uniform was streaked with dust and sweat, her hair clinging to her forehead in damp strands. Max lay at her feet, his head resting on his paws, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion, but still alert to every passing sound. The children had been taken away to safety. The remaining traffickers were either dead, handcuffed in the back of police cruisers, or being loaded into ambulances. It should have felt like victory, But it didn't. Something was still off. The file she had found in locker 472, those names, the flight schedules, they pointed to something much larger than the men they had stopped tonight. Detective Alan Reyes from the FBI stepped out of an unmarked SUV, his clean-cut suit somehow still pristine despite the night's chaos. He carried a leather folder in one hand, and his sharp eyes locked on Sarah as he approached. "Officer Monroe," Reyes said, extending his hand. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of someone who was used to cleaning up after storms like this. Sarah shook it firmly, her gaze steely. "I hope you're not here to tell me to stand down." Reyes shook his head, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "No, officer. Quite the opposite. We've been circling this operation for months, but every time we got close, they slipped away. You and Max," he glanced at the dog, who was now sitting upright, ears perked. "You cracked it wide open." Sarah felt her chest tighten with emotion. "But the man on the roof, he's gone. The files are gone. The leader's still out there." Reyes raised an eyebrow and handed her a thin stack of papers from his folder. Surveillance photos, names, accounts, flight manifests. Someone inside the organization had been feeding information to the FBI. "The janitor," Sarah whispered, realization dawning. "The one who gave me the locker number. He was trying to make things right." Reyes nodded. "We've been working with him for weeks. When you started digging, it forced their hand. You became a threat and they panicked." Sarah swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the papers. "Is this enough? Enough to stop them?" Reyes hesitated before replying. "It's enough to start unraveling them. Arrests are already being made in Bogota, New York, and LA, but the man at the top, he's still out there. He won't stay hidden for long, though. Not after tonight." Sarah let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Max nudged her hand with his nose, his warm breath grounding her in the moment. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood in a courtroom in downtown Denver, her uniform crisp and her badge polished to a shine. The gallery was filled with families, parents clutching their children, people who had been directly or indirectly affected by the operations Sarah and Max had helped dismantle. The judge, a stern-looking woman with piercing eyes, read the charges aloud. Human trafficking, conspiracy, corruption at the highest levels of airport security. Several suspects, including a high-ranking transportation official, sat stone-faced in the defendant's box. When the gavel slammed down, sentencing them to decades behind bars, Sarah let out a quiet sigh of relief. Max sat faithfully by her side, drawing small smiles from people in the gallery. Outside the courtroom, a young girl, one of the children Sarah and Max had rescued, ran up to them. Her bright pink sneakers were unmistakable. "Hi, Max," she said shyly, clutching a small stuffed dog in her arms. Max's tail wagged furiously as he gently sniffed her hand before pressing his head against her chest. The girl giggled, and her mother, tears streaking her face, mouthed a silent thank you to Sarah. Sarah knelt beside Max and smiled at the girl. "You're safe now, sweetheart. That's all that matters." A month later, Sarah stood in her modest backyard, the crisp Colorado air filling her lungs. Max was rolling around in the grass, his usual alert posture replaced with pure, unguarded joy. It was the first time in weeks Sarah had seen him so relaxed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Detective Reyes. "They got him," he said without preamble. "The head of the snake. A sting operation in Panama City last night. He's in custody." Sarah closed her eyes, a wave of relief washing over her. "It's over. For now," Reyes replied. "But the world's always got more shadows, Monroe. Take the win. You and Max earned it." She hung up and looked out over her backyard, where the sky was painted in shades of orange and lavender. Max trotted over to her and dropped a well-worn tennis ball at her feet, his tail wagging expectantly. Sarah laughed softly. "You never stop, do you?" She threw the ball across the yard, and Max tore after it with all the energy of a puppy. As he bounded back toward her, Sarah felt something she hadn't in a long time. Peace. Her phone buzzed again. A text this time. "Commendation ceremony, 10 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. And bring Max. He's earned it." She smiled, tucking her phone away. Tomorrow would be for medals and applause, but today was for them, for her and Max, the unshakable bond that had carried them through the darkness and into the light. As the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows crept across the yard, Max returned with the ball, dropping it at her feet once again. His amber eyes locked onto hers, and in that quiet moment, they both understood something profound. They weren't just partners, they were family.